Binational Center in Córdoba, Argentina. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the 15th webinar of Teaching Capacity Building 2022, a professional development program sponsored by the US Embassy that we started hosting in 2020 in response to the challenges we faced at the beginning of the pandemic. If you have attended the previous webinars, you already know that the program consists of 15 webinars presented by hardworking Argentine English teachers that are alumni of US-sponsored professional development exchange programs. They have been sharing their experience, their best practices as educators and language teachers in their quest to create environments that support engagement for learning. We strongly believe that no matter where we are in our learning journeys as teachers, we can always learn something from the journey of others. So we sincerely hope that these presentations have inspired you to bring new perspectives into your current teaching practice, whether it is in person, online, or hybrid, and that they will help you create exciting learning experiences for your students. We are deeply grateful to the US Embassy, the Regional English Language Officer, all the alumni presenters, and the Argentine Network of Binational Centers for their support in the organization and delivery of this program. Today, we have Noris Servat from the Embassy, who will address you because we are finishing the program with today's webinar. So Noris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the last webinar in 2022. This is really a program that makes me happy, and I do hope that you enjoyed. And I want to thank you, everybody who make such an effort to be here with all of us, all the alumni, in this case, Romina Maracita, the whole team in ICANA with Eleonora, Mariano, Andrea, and everybody, and the participants, of course. Without you, we wouldn't be able to host all these webinars with high satisfaction. Thank you so much, everybody. And we do hope that these webinars, this program has been beneficiary for all of you or some of you in somehow. We hope that we can do something else in the future for the teachers of English in Argentina and in the rest of the world. And we are happy to have you all here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, because you are representing, the US Embassy, who have so generously, been supporting us since 2020 with this teaching capacity building program. And thank you again for joining us. And you can share in the chat where you are from. Some people have been attending the webinars since May. Thank you so much. And today we are honored to have Romina Maracita, who has been helping us since the beginning of teaching capacity in 2020. Romina has a Master of Arts degree in neuropedagogy, and she's from Buenos Aires. She has worked at tertiary and university level at Instituto Science and Universidad Nacional del Litoral. She also runs her own private institute in her hometown. She has a Bachelor of Arts and a specialist degree in virtual learning environments from Universidad de Quilmes. She also completed her TESOL certificate through Arizona State University online with the sponsorship of the US Embassy. She also completed the Advanced Certificate in English program from the University of Oregon, also with the sponsorship of the US Embassy. And she's here today to share her views on motivating Gen Alpha and how neuropedagogy can provide a guide to unlock students' internal drive for learning. Thank you very much, Romina. Please, you can start typing comments and questions in the chat, and Romina will address them by the end, or if you can, Romina, during the presentation, as you like it. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you for your time and for being here. A big thank you always to Eleonora, Noris, and ICANA Binational Center and the US Embassy for such a great opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be part of it. So it's always a pleasure. Let me share my screen so that we can start with the presentation. Great. There. Everything is fine so that you can see my screen. Well, welcome everyone. We have people from different countries and provinces within Argentina. So, well, different countries, welcome. Well, my presentation today is about Gen Alpha. This is a new generation, and everyone who maybe works in primary or secondary school, but especially primary school, we are in front of children who are 9, 10, 11 years old, and they are from this new generation, Gen Alpha. And Gen Alpha came to shake the ground and rethink the future of our practices, because in fact, they have different needs, different traits, different characteristics. And that's why our purpose today is to know a little bit more about them, right? And to see how maybe from the point of view of neuroeducation, we can unlock their drive for learning, which is so difficult nowadays. So let's get started. This is an illustration from Heisu Lee, a great artist. And in this illustration, the artist was asked to represent Generation Alpha. And here, this is what we have as a result. If we pay close attention to details, just to begin, have a look at the number of screens, right? Even the baby being fed with the mobile phone, right? Hashtags, robots in the way, more screens imitating human movements and everything. And this is what we are dealing with, right? We are dealing with screens, with kids that have been exposed to screens since they were born. So they have really different traits. The term Gen Alpha was coined by Mark McCrindle. McCrindle has a wonderful website for you to consult and know more about Gen Alpha. And he described this generation from the year 2010 to 2024. This is the scope of the generation of Gen Alpha before Gen Beta begins in 2025. They are the children of Generation Y, millennials, often the younger siblings of Generation Z, and by nature, they are screenagers. They were born the year that Instagram was created, the word app was the word of the year, and the iPad was launched. So this is their environment. And that's why Gen Alpha has a lot to say about new ways of learning and acquiring information. This is a chart reproduced with permission of mccrindle.com, in which we can see the main features of Gen Alpha. I'm going to concentrate just on the aspects that are important for the session, for learning, but there are many more that then you can go if you're interested and read more about. They are called the Alphas, the Generation Glass, the Global Gen. Have a look at their 5 main characteristics. They are global, digital, social, mobile, and visual. We are going to get into each of these characteristics later on in the session. I would like you to pay attention to the icons, the incoming technology that they manage, that it's an extension of their hands. It's part of their lives, right? If we place ourselves in the year 2020, for example, have a look, AirPods, 5G, biometrics, autonomous or driverless vehicles, quantum computing, etc. And the outgoing technology, right? Again, have a look at 2020, textbooks, desktop computer, credit card, wallet, analog watch. Maybe many of us might be thinking, well, but I still use all of them. All right. And of course, you're right. We all use them. But have a look at how Gen Alpha will be surrounded of different items. And that's why they will have different learning needs. Below in the chart, and I'm going to read it because maybe it is not, as it is so small, maybe you're not able to see it, the new jobs that they will have in the future. Drone pilots, cybersecurity specialists, robotics mechanics, sleep technicians, driverless train operators, even a space tourism agent, artificial intelligence specialists, virtual reality engineers. They will be part of any area of work. So, what are their traits? How can we describe Gen Alpha kids? Well, there are 5 areas that today we are going to analyze. First of all, the problems related to personal and social issues, the exposure that they get, the acculturation process and the adaptation from previous generations, the impact that this has on family and social life, and the learning environment. It is really key to get to know these aspects because as teachers, we are always working with people, and the person that is in front of us, in this case, the kid or the pre-teenager, is surrounded by this environment. And this impact then will have an impact on learning. So as regards the first issue and problem, well, the problems that they are experiencing so far would be summarized with eye problems that are on the rise, nearsightedness on the increase, digital eye strain and blurry vision, difficulty in concentration or difficulty to focus, right? Regular headaches, sleep deprivation. They spend so much time on the screen that there are very poor sleep hygiene habits. Impaired language development on many occasions because of just being a passive consumer of the net and social media. Difficulty paying attention, and this is something that maybe we observe in our classes, and poor eating habits that we know that is so important for the brain to develop successfully and in a healthy way. All this brings to the exposure that they get. This is a generation that they are within menace of cyberbullying or cybercrime, addiction to screen usage, exposure to inappropriate content so far, more physical idle time, less body movement, fewer kinesthetic activities, wastage of mental energy, because on many occasions, this passive consumption doesn't make them think critically about something or solve situations, right? So there is a wastage of mental energy. And as a consequence, a loss of intellectual curiosity. And as teachers, we know that curiosity is one of the main factors to instill motivation, attention, and then learning. So that is something that we should foster and pay close attention to as regards that. Okay, let me go further here. Great. What about the process of acculturation? Well, how is it that they adapted from previous generations? Well, their parents are deeply involved in the use of different devices due to the present digital work style. Take my case, I am 42 years old, my son is 10, and I am here, right, in a digital work style. So they see all this. And this has been increased and fostered because of the recent pandemics, COVID first, second, and third wave. So they know that their parents are heavy users of social media, digital gadgets, etc. And this influences their behavior as well. This has a huge impact on family and social life. First of all, these kids and pre-teenagers have an underdeveloped area that is risk assessment, the ability to assess and manage risks of very minute nature when they are alone. So this is something to pay close attention to. The other aspect would be health impact. They spend less time outdoors, excessive time in daycare or double shifts at schools, or the opposite, maybe excessive time out of school due to pandemic. So both extremes created an impact on their social life. What's their projection? They will live longer, they will have smaller families, and they will face extreme weather conditions, no matter where they live. So they need to be flexible and adaptable to survive in the future. From a social psychological perspective, they will be more entrepreneurial. They will communicate through gadgets and they will gravitate throughout mobile-friendly apps, but that's going to be their main source of communication. So how do they learn? That's the big question. Well, learning for them, from their point of view, learning is about innovating, building skills, and engaging in the real world. That's why these three words are important to remember, to have as a reminder always on top before we start or we plan any activity in the classroom: to innovate, to build skills, and to engage, right? Innovate, build, and engage. There are three key words that define them. And that is what they expect in a class, in any class, right? They want to build, to create, to be an active participant. That's why immersive and responsive technologies will be integrated within the learning environment, as we said before, with all the incoming technology that they manage. But at the same time, there are two aspects that we have to focus as teachers, because maybe they have lots of expectations about innovation and building skills, etc. But there is an area that they need to work a lot on, and that is person-to-person interaction. This is a generation that will need to cultivate soft skills and social skills because maybe they haven't been exposed to them so much as previous generations. And some examples that are useful to take into account for our classes is regulating behavior, self-regulation, interacting with others, setting goals to focus, developing habits of mind, right? The question of habits development is a great issue nowadays. So there is our big job, right? To get all this. The most important thing to remember so far is skill building. We need to build skills, and that's why it's there big, right? Because this is more important than to master content. That's why it is smaller. It's much more important. Why? Because we are training them for future jobs that nowadays maybe do not exist here, but they will need to perform in those jobs. So they will need skills. And that is more important than content. The content will be there, but the skills have to be built. And that takes time and effort and motivation. There are 5 areas, right, we should analyze in order to implement neuroeducation in this generation. Remember, they are digital beings, right? And that's why they are less proficient in practical skills. So they need to work a lot on resilience and on resourcefulness. They are social, and they are connected to and shaped by their peers all the time, 24/7. And this again can have a good part and maybe a negative part. We need to back them up a lot, and we need to work on social emotional learning, right? So that they can foster these soft skills that maybe they are missing out. They are global. Nowadays, there are no boundaries. Maybe they like the same music, fashions, movies, food, right? And they are going to be trained to belong to a global workforce. They are mobile. In their future, in 10 years, they will have many jobs for very short periods, and they are visual. This is essential for our classes. They are image-based. Everything is image-based. They rather watch a video summarizing an issue than read an article. So again, that is another aspect to take into account in our classes. That's why in the recent Learning Technologies Convention that took place in Paris, France, 2022, this took place in May, there was a forecast about the future of education and technology. And their forecast was about these 6 aspects. Blended learning, education in the future will be blended, will be hybrid. It's a generation that will demand micro-learning and mobile learning, learning from any personal device, and micro-learning, short periods of learning, short topics, right? Divided, that they can make a choice, that they can decide what to learn first and what to learn next. Gamification, of course, immersive technology and the metaverse, and lifelong learning. We know, as we have previously said, that this generation will live longer, and learning has to be considered lifelong learning. That's why this question of building skills that they will change, adapt, but they will use all their lives. And the last aspect that they mentioned in this convention was the role of neuroscience and neuropedagogy. Neuropedagogy will have the main role of education in the future. Why? Because it bases their foundations on the biological needs of students. And that's why it's so important. Therefore, my link, right, on to how neuroeducation and neuropedagogy can help this new generation and can help us as teachers to understand them and to plan accordingly. If we go to some definitions as regards neuroscience, neuroscience should be, here I'm going to move my screen there, should be required for all students of education to familiarize them with the oriented concepts of the field, the culture of scientific inquiry, everything that is based on the biological needs of students, the connection between emotion and function, emotion and learning, how emotion affects learning and performance. These are key issues that teachers should know in advance. According to the Neuroeducation Research Association, neuroeducation is a complementary approach to other approaches such as cognitivism, constructivism, or any other. But what distinguishes neuroeducation from others is that it situates its analysis of educational problems at the brain level using brain imaging techniques. And as technology goes further, we have more brain imaging techniques and more ways of seeing what our brains do, right? It's like we have like more windows to open, and we have more opportunities to discover what we need to learn better and to optimize learning. So that's why often the question is, well, and now what's my role as a teacher? The content is there. I have to help them build skills. There is a new generation that they have very different needs and concepts from mine. What do I do? Well, educators will have a key role here. Educators will be the lifeline they need to climb for access to the playing field of the 21st century opportunity and skills. They need to develop specific skill sets, right, that we have in red, right, highlighted. That's why teachers who are prepared with knowledge of the workings of the brain will have the optimism, incentive, motivation to follow the ongoing research and adapt the research into the classroom. We have to bring the most of their brain potential, customizing their needs with an inclusive approach of learning, and really trying to get the highest 21st century potential in them, starting now. That's why this is so important. Jude Willis, that is a great psychoeducator, and it's another person we should follow, says that one example is the research about the brain's neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is like the star in neuroeducation, so you're going to listen to this many times. Because neuroplasticity has to do with the opportunity that we have as educators. Have a look. We can help students literally change their brains. And it's literally, yes, you literally change your brain when you learn, when you have a positive or negative experience. Intelligence is not something fixed. It's something that you develop, that you modify, that you go through many stages. And each time you learn something new, your neural connections are greater and more interactive, and there are more opportunities to model your brain. So to become a teacher without understanding the implications, right, of brain changing neuroplasticity is a great loss for teachers and for students, right? Because we are missing out a lot. And it's very, very important to take the concept of neuroplasticity, especially with the latest discovery, that we are plastic till the day we die. I mean, we can learn at any age. Of course, there are sensitive periods of learning, but the brain is plastic and we can learn and modify it at any age with more or less effort, but we can. And as teachers, we have to remember a key concept for neuropedagogy. It's only when information is processed here in the prefrontal cortex, right, that new learning can be incorporated into the long-term memory. So that means that in order for my students to remember everything that I do in my class, I need to provide an enriched environment. If not, there are stressors going around and they will wake up something that is there in the picture, that is the amygdala. The amygdala, the size of an almond in our brain, is the one in charge and responsible for the response and memory of emotions, especially fear. When is it activated and blocks learning? For example, when we are frustrated. We are frustrated, we have had repeated failures in the subject, we are stressed, maybe because of family pressure, peer pressure, a lack of bond with a teacher, for example, and we are bored. Oh, this info is already old, I have already mastered this information, so it's not useful, I block my brain. So the amygdala is always there, right, waiting to see, right? It is often represented as a switch, right? That will switch an input and output away from the prefrontal cortex, right? And will take everything down to the lower and reactive brain. When the brain is reactive, because we are nervous, stressed, bored, frustrated, we are having a negative experience in the classroom, well, there I have behavior reactive responses from the lower brain. And they are just involuntary responses of flight, or fight or freeze, right? Sometimes I get paralyzed, I get blocked, I try to escape and my mind is out of the class, but it is the response of the lower and reactive brain. So as teachers, we have to remember that when we know about the brain's reactions to the stressors that will promote, right, this awakening of the lower brain, we will know and we will become much more aware of how much we can influence brain processing and the processing of information in the classroom. Sometimes teachers need to understand that reactions from students are just reactions from the lower brain, from the reactive brain. So when they have a behavior reaction, right, it's not reflective of their academic potential. It's not voluntary on many occasions. It's just a reaction because the amygdala was in charge. So maybe there I can see that it's not like their fault, right? But it is just a chemical reaction. And I need to modify that. How? Providing an enriched environment, maybe changing the strategy, making them curious about what we are going to discuss today, finding other ways to promote successful memory construction and cognitive processing, to activate the prefrontal cortex. That's key to remember. How can we do that? Because the question is always how. How do we do that? Well, of course, the first step, enriched environment. We have to provide a safe haven, right? This can be done through music, through visual schedules, a nice environment in the class, whether it is face-to-face or an online environment, nice visual aids, a nice aroma, to teach students how to prepare for the class. They are all elements that can lower anxiety in the brain, can anticipate what we're going to do, and the brain feels safe and the amygdala is not there activated. We are going to see many tools for that at the end of the session as regards this activation. Okay. Another important aspect is to provide opportunities to learn through different channels, right? We need opportunities. And when we talk about different channels, it's like we do not have to label students where you're visual, you're kinesthetic, and you're auditor. No, we have to provide different channels. All the channels, the more the better. And they have to experience different channels. Of course, there is going to be one that is of their preference and which they find easier. But that doesn't mean that we should label them and try to divide the exposure in that way. Students have to build their own knowledge. They have to experience learning firsthand. They have to manipulate information. They have to do something with information that we give them. It's the only way that can be transferred into long-term memory. And they have to interact constantly, remember, in order to also promote social emotional skills. That's why self-regulation, motivation, and autonomy are very important. And don't forget, this mind and brain education theory provides like sort of avenue, right? To begin to examine how the educational approaches that maybe we use, and maybe they are all different here, support or constrain critical cognitive capacities. Remember, this is a complementary approach. We can adapt this to any approach that we are using by changing the way we do things, not the content and not even the material, but the way we stand in front of the lesson and we prepare our tasks. It can provide a framework for understanding how to encourage a change in the system. We need to change that system so that we can support teachers and students to develop students' cognitive abilities. So always remember, we are like in a sort of avenue, right? Going and improving all the time. Jean-Philippe Avgral says that for that to happen, and to open their sensory channels and for students to be curious and to be there, right, hands-on, we always need to motivate, always motivate. Now, the question of motivation has had so many models and everything that sometimes we take many things for granted, and it is not so easy to motivate, right? Because you can, of course, so the student can have the extrinsic motivation, well, I have to pass, I have to do this, but that is not what we are looking for. In neuroeducation, we are trying for them to get involved, so involved that they lose track of time. And there we imply a different kind of motivation, that is the intrinsic motivation. Now, the question is that this kind of motivation depends on many aspects, but one of the main aspects is our perceived competence, the representation, for example, that I have of myself, my abilities and what I can do, metacognition there comes in the way, and the representation that I have of myself in society. So, what's the problem? That if my representation is negative, right? These will influence my engagement in the task, and therefore I will no longer be motivated. And if my representation is positive, this will be of a great help. So it's very important how we build representations of learners. And here again, social emotional learning comes into play. It's very important to take that into account, to try to build the right representation so that students can feel motivated to do something. The motivation is described as an internal force, right? With 4 different elements according to this author. Direction. I need to be directed towards a goal. And this is our task. How can we direct them towards a goal? How can we make them curious? We make them want to know more about it so that there is triggering. This triggering that will trigger a change in behavior. I have a goal, I am directed towards it, and now I have a trigger. I will change my behavior in order to get something, right? To get through that goal. And this will lead to persistence, because so far so good, but here in the third aspect is where we all abandon and quit things. in the item of persistence, that's the most difficult part of motivation. Think of everything, any activity that you started and then you say, well, okay, I give up. There, you gave up in this third step. And this is something that we can teach students through developing habits of mind. We have to teach them to be persistent, find strategies as to overcome obstacles, be resilient, right? So that they can persist to their goal and they can keep the intensity. That is the fourth aspect. This presence of a force that makes you go the extra mile, right? And provokes that you go on and on. That's why nowadays we talk about an integrative model of motivation. This figure is by a French author, right, Fabienne Fenelon, who in 2016 provided this model, saying, to summarize, because then obviously you will have time to maybe look at it in detail, but to summarize the most important aspects, said that we can have different motives, primary, secondary, primary basic needs, right, like hunger, thirst, or something that we really need. Secondary, maybe a value, a goal, but it doesn't matter whether it is primary or secondary, there is always a prediction, right? A prediction as to whether this will fail or succeed. And this happens at a subconscious level. And after my prediction, in order to be more or less motivated, there comes the part that we can foster in students, decision-making strategies. Why? Because we need decision-making and we need to make the right decisions to choose the right strategy to get my goal. So that again is very, very important as teachers to foster and instill. This will create a change of behavior in our students and therefore get the outcome. That's why, and we are repeating the same terms again, orientation, self-regulation, social emotional learning, they are all complementary to neuroeducation because it is the way that our student will be prepared to face the task, any task. Because again, remember that the idea for this generation is skill building, right? We need to build skills to master any content that they are confronted with. But if you have the skills, if you have the way, if you are aware of your metacognitive skills, well, there it's much easier and much better with a better outcome as well. So how can we foster curiosity and this intrinsic motivation in teaching Gen Alpha? Well, Csikszentmihalyi, who again is a very interesting author, has a theory of flow. I'm sure we have all heard this term before, but it's now applied to education in the sense that when we achieve a sense of flow, we lose track of time, right? We are so involved in the task that we don't care about anything else. We are deeply involved. And that is like the best way to learn something. He said that there are some conditions that have to be met. For example, that the task being undertaken is achievable, but challenging, because remember that Gen Alpha says, if this is something that I already know, I don't care. So it has to be challenging. The individual has to be focused on what he or she is doing, no distractions. There has to be a clear target. And the exercise has to be so motivating for the student so that the preoccupation with the self disappears. And I am just there trying to solve the task and to get it through, but because I really want to do it and not because I have to. There is when the perception of duration is altered and lost, and you don't even remember how much time you have spent doing something because you were involved. So you achieved a sense of flow. Of course, that neuroeducation and this motivation theory are aligned with some methodologies. Obviously, there are some methodologies which work better right? When we apply theme-based instruction, because if everything is organized around a theme that is concrete, that is of their interest and everything, of course, information processing will be much better. Everything that has to do with simulation, movement, kinesthetic experiences with the subject matter, this is incredibly good to foster neural circuits, right, that maybe haven't been involved in visual or verbal experiences. So the question of doing, manipulating, right, creating and producing, these are 4 key verbs. And the idea of project-based learning and many variants, but PBL can access the brain natural tendencies to think global, and they can make students focus on content, but through the development of skills. So this is also that sometimes helps. The arts and music and gamification, right? They are areas that help a lot, right? The impact of art and music on learning, memory, motivation are only some of the areas that are being researched by mind and brain education and neuroscience. There are even cellular aspects of learning, and they are demonstrating the physical effects of art exposure. So that's another friend that we must have in our classes. Remember, and we are getting to the end of the session with this conclusion and some practical tips. Neuropedagogy provides a model, right, that addresses students' needs on a biological level. Neuroeducation is not about making radical changes in content knowledge or even the material that you are using right now, but it's about developing cognitive capacities that can be utilized across content areas. It's about the how, right? And to build a lot on the student so that the student can produce. That's why we can apply it no matter which methodology we are using or what material we are using in our lessons. Of course, the difficult thing sometimes is to start. And this session, the purpose was just to spark interest in neuroeducation and neuropedagogy, because it's one of the main protagonists in the future of education. But I also know it is difficult to say, well, now, tomorrow I go to my class and what do I do? So I created a Google Doc, and you can scan the QR code right now. I think that Mariano is going to be sharing it as well, just in case you do not have access to the QR. And in this doc, yeah, there Mariano has just posted the link. Great. In that talk, you will see lots of resources to follow certain steps just to get started, right? And to have like a sort of guide. Of course, there are millions of resources, but just to get a guide. Remember the first thing that we said, we need to create a safe haven, right? And there you have 2 resources to create online visual schedules for your classes and to make everything visual, to anticipate our brains, what we're going to do in the lesson, lower anxiety, and many other routines. The second website is from RSAC, and you have pictograms to adapt every visual schedules for students with special needs. So it is very, very, very useful. You just type the word and a picture or an icon emerges for visual aids. Secondly, remember that with all this brain revolution, kids are rather lost. I mean, they are undergoing changes that they are not aware of. So it's also good to teach them how their brain works, because then they will be more aware and conscious of their changes. So in that website, the second one, you have great material to work with kids about how our brain works. It's a great website because it has friendly material, yes, that was prepared for kids with very simple language, cartoons, pictures, drawings that exemplify how our brain works, when it works best. It also gives like advice on sleeping and eating habits and many other areas. Then, thirdly, we have to remember that learning has to do with emotions. There is no learning without emotions, right? Because for many years, we have heard that human beings are rational beings, but in fact, we are emotional beings. Everything goes through emotion. So remember that without emotion, there is no direction, no triggering, no attention, no motivation, and no learning, because the amygdala takes control. So everything that has to do with emotions is sometimes difficult to start dealing with in class. And in that website, there are more than 100 resources just as to cope with emotions, social emotional journals that are printable, emotional check-in resources to use at the beginning of the class and at the end, and growth mindset cards. Well, lots of materials to start with that part of learning. The fourth step, motivation. Of course, this is what we talked about today. Well, there in that link, you have a very nice motivation workbook that is printable for students to become aware of their own process. And again, to work with process. This process will save a lot of time in the future, because when you know your abilities, remember the representation of yourself and everything, well, there you are much more powerful, right, to confront any task that you have in front of you. Step 5, well, 5, 6, and 7 are for teachers. And 5 is read a little bit more about the brain revolution. There you have a great website with lots of info. Useful podcast for teachers. Each podcast, I tell you, it's an eye-opener. There are more than 50 neuropedagogical sort of tips. And timing is key. Remember that for good motivation and good learning, we need to optimize our timing, resources, and tasks. And there we have 50 brain breaks to use in the classroom. Maybe this rings a bell because last week there was an outstanding presentation about brain breaks by Laura. And that's why maybe many of the aspects that we talked about today maybe rang a bell there, because you saw them last Friday. But again, this is very important. We need to take care of our brains in order to learn better. That's it. That's the main message. I really want to thank you for your time, right? I hope that we could spark a little interest in neuroeducation and neuropedagogy, and that we become maybe more aware, or that we can start doing some research on it and applying it as much as we can in our classes. Eleonora, on to you, and thanks again.
Thank you, Romina, because this has been so enlightening, and thank you for sharing all your resources and all your expertise. This shows, all this, how much, in fact, we have to do as teachers to explore, We have been learning about the brain, but,
Yes.
At least in my case, the older you get, the more you analyze your own brain too. and the more you see how you have to change your approach to teach younger generations.
Totally.
Because it's not just, people your age or your children or your grandchildren.
Yeah.
You have pointed out the importance of teaching skills, more than content. And I can see that our main responsibility now is helping our learners become meta learners. So that so they should be meta learners, not learners, but meta learners, so that they know how to learn, that they know themselves, that they are aware, as you pointed out. And again, all these buzzwords that we have now, like the growth mindset and awareness and iteration. It's all these new explorations, in social emotional learning, and thinking, of what we want our students, to be able to do, and thinking back, and planning and preparing. Okay, really preparing. It's a lot. I hope all of you have taken tips and resources not only from your presentation, Romina, that has been excellent, but also from all the other webinars. I'm so thankful to all the alumni this year. Ricardo Martin Ramirez, Dennis Andersen, Ana Cecilia Cad, Alba Rioja, Gonzalo Diaz, Susana Perez, Laura Giacomini, and you, of course. Every single webinar has been so enlightening. People have taken away so much. What I do hope is that not only have they taken away so much, that they have also, felt more empowered and motivated to explore and hopefully to try them out. Okay?
Exactly.
That's what we need. We need
Yes.
to venture out into what's coming. Okay, and we don't really know what's coming. So this being able to cope with all this uncertainty that was, increased with the pandemic. But I think we feel motivated, and programs like teaching capacity building help us, to grow. So
Obviously.
thank you, everyone. People are thanking everyone. Because, well, we have to close the program.
Yes, it's the last one.
It's been, going on since May. Hopefully next year we'll do something else. We need to innovate constantly, and we need to continue growing. All of you, there's so much to choose, for
Surely.
professional development. So many times for teachers, we suffer this decision fatigue, that we have to continually make decisions.
Exactly.
Yes, but I think, what we have organized, this once a week, taking 1 hour for us, maybe with a cup of coffee, wherever you are. And I
Yes.
really appreciate people who are joining us, from the Middle East, from Asia, and I don't know what time it is over there.
That's right.
And all the people
And they
who
are
are
there.
joining us from Argentina. Thank you, everyone, from all the provinces. This shows that you are all committed teachers
Committed
and
teachers, of course.
educators, and that we want to, continue growing for the sake of our students.
Yes,
Right?
totally. That's right.
So
To bring the most out of them.
yes. So thank you, everyone. You know that
Thank
you
you.
can download your certificate of attendance from the chat. Romina has shared all her resources, and you can always visit ICANNA's website, where you can find, the link to ICANNA's YouTube. If you have missed any of the webinars, you can watch the recordings. Until November the 30th, they will be all available. So it's just up to you to continue growing. Thank you again, Romina.
A big
Thank
thank you.
you, Norris. Thank you
Yes.
to the Regional English Language Officer. I want to thank my team here at ICANNA,
Yes.
Mariano, Andrea, Guillermo, who are the people who support us, with all the mechanics, and everything we need for this to work out. And I apologize if there have been, problems or something, that was not as you expected. Thank you again for your understanding. Okay, so, well, just a huge hug to all of you, and let's keep in touch. Romina, we sure we will
Yes,
be
we
in
will.
touch. Yes. And I invite you to continue following us on social media, and to please visit the American English state site, because download the forum magazines, to enroll in the Online Professional English Network MOOC courses that are all free for teachers. Thanks to the Department of State, you know, there are so many free resources for teachers all over the world, and so many American spaces to help you out. So thank you all, and we'll see, I hope to see you all next year. So
Thank you.
bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.